My father's funeral was on a Friday in March, and the thing I remember most about it is the weather. It had been raining since Wednesday. The kind of Ohio March rain that isn't dramatic, no thunder, no wind, just a steady, gray, indefinite falling that makes everything look slightly out of focus. The cemetery grass was soft underfoot. The folding chairs they'd set up beside the grave sank a little under everyone's weight. I stood at the edge of the gathering and watched people cry. My aunts, my father's co-workers from the plant, men I barely knew who were nonetheless visibly moved. Our neighbor from across the street, who had brought a casserole to our house every Christmas for 20 years, and who pressed my hand at the reception afterward with genuine feeling, and told me my father was a good man. I did not cry. I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you this because I thought I was better than the people who did. I'm telling you because I spent most of that afternoon standing in the rain trying to understand what I actually felt, and the honest answer was that I didn't know. There was grief in there somewhere, something that ached in the way that loss always aches, regardless of the relationship. But underneath it, quieter and stranger, was something else. Relief. I recognized it, and then I pushed it down. Because this was my father's funeral, and a son who feels relieved at his father's funeral is exactly the kind of son I had always been warned I might become. The kind who didn't feel things the right way. The kind who couldn't control what was inside him. Except I had spent 38 years controlling what was inside me. With a discipline so practiced, it had become invisible even to me. I had never once in my adult life raised my voice in anger at another person. I had never struck anyone, never broken anything, never said the thing I knew would cause the most damage in an argument because the damage would be irreversible, and I understood the weight of words used as weapons. I had built my entire life around not becoming what everyone told me I was. And standing in the rain at my father's funeral, I understood, for the first time and in a formless way I couldn't yet name, that I was tired. Profoundly, completely, 38 years of it tired. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm a mechanical engineer. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dayton that I've occupied for 6 years and furnished with the careful, unshowy taste of a person who has learned not to want things too loudly. I don't have a wife. I don't have children. I have a handful of friendships I maintain at a comfortable distance, and a colleague named James who is probably the closest thing to a best friend I've allowed myself as an adult. I run 3 mornings a week. I cook simple meals. I go to bed at 10:30. I am, in almost every observable way, a controlled person. This is not an accident. The first time I was told I had an anger problem, I was 6 years old. I had been crying. I don't remember what about, something small, some frustration of the kind that 6-year-olds experience and express without editing. My father was in the kitchen doorway watching me, and I remember his expression more than anything else. Not concern. Not the face of a parent watching a child cry. Something harder than that. Appraising. "Look at you," he said. "Can't control yourself." I stopped crying. Not because I'd resolved whatever I'd been crying about, but because the way he said it made me feel that the crying itself was the problem. That the emotion, whatever it was, however small, was evidence of something wrong. "Robert," my mother said, from somewhere behind him. "He needs to learn," my father said. That was the first lesson. Feeling things too visibly was losing control. Losing control was what my father did. The raised voice, the fist on the table, the particular stillness that preceded an eruption the way certain silences precede storms. And if I felt things visibly, I was like him. I did not want to be like him, so I learned to be very still. Here is the thing about growing up in a house with a volatile parent. You become an expert reader of atmosphere. You learn to detect the barometric pressure of a room. You notice the way your father holds his shoulders when he comes home from work, the specific quality of silence that means dinner will be difficult, the half second between a question and his response that tells you everything about how the next hour will go. I was good at reading rooms by the time I was 8. Very good. The kind of good that gets mistaken for emotional intelligence in adults and goes entirely unnoticed in children, because children aren't supposed to be managing the emotional climate of their households. My father broke things sometimes. Not constantly. I want to be accurate about this. Not every week, not even every month, but there was a regularity to it that made the calm periods feel less like peace and more like intermission. A mug once. The wooden handle of a kitchen cabinet. His fist against the drywall in the hallway. which left a dent we lived with for 3 years before my mother quietly had someone come to fill it. The pattern that followed these moments was more consistent than the moments themselves. My father's rage would peak and then subside, and in the aftermath there was always a finding of cause. A reason, something or someone that had made this happen. Usually, the reason was me. "You know how you get him," my mother said once, after an evening that had ended with broken glass and a slammed door, and my father's truck pulling out of the driveway too fast. I was 10. I had said something at dinner. I don't remember what, some ordinary thing, some observation or correction or expression of an opinion, that had set off the sequence. "I didn't mean to," I said. "I know," she said. She was cleaning up the glass, she didn't look at me. "But you know how he gets, you have to be more careful." The implication was clear. I had caused this. Something in me had triggered something in him. The lesson wasn't that my father's behavior was his responsibility. The lesson was that I needed to monitor myself more carefully because I had a quality, unnamed but understood, that made things worse. By the time I was 12, I believed this completely. The school incident happened when I was 11. There was a boy in my class, Tyler Marsh, who had been making my life difficult since 4th grade in the low-grade, persistent way that certain children specialize in. Nothing dramatic, mostly comments, the kind that land just right, plus the particular social maneuvering that ensures other kids keep their distance from the target. One afternoon on the walk home, Tyler said something about my mother. I pushed him. Once. He fell back against a chain-link fence, more surprised than hurt, and we stood there looking at each other for a moment before he walked away. I told my parents that evening. I explained what Tyler had said, why I'd responded, the fact that it had been one push and he was fine. My father looked at me across the dinner table. "I knew it," he said, not with anger, almost with something like satisfaction. "You've got it too," my mother said very quietly. "Ethan, you can't let your temper do that." "It wasn't," I started. "We'll get you some help," my mother said, as if I'd confessed to something. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a beige office across from a woman named Dr. Patricia Calloway, who had kind eyes and a collection of small plants on her windowsill, and asked me questions in a patient voice that made it clear she was in no hurry. I went 4 times. My parents never took me back. I didn't know, until 27 years later, what Dr. Calloway had written in her report. The years between 11 and 18 are a long education in self-distrust. My parents never said, explicitly, "You are dangerous." They didn't need to. The language was more distributed than that. It lived in the way my father looked at me during arguments, watchful, as if waiting for something to emerge. In the way my mother sometimes stepped between us not to protect me, but to manage me, her hand on my arm the way you'd steady something that might tip. In the extended family's treatment of me as a child who needed gentle handling, careful questions, careful conversations, a particular way of pausing before responding to me that I eventually understood was everyone waiting to see how I'd react. My uncle once said, at a family cookout when I was 14, to the cousin standing beside him, "He's got Robert's blood, you'll see." He didn't know I could hear him. I spent the rest of that afternoon sitting, alone by the fence at the edge of the yard, not because I was angry, but because I was afraid that if I rejoined the family, I would do something to prove him right. Her name was Melissa. We were 24. We'd been together 8 months when she told me she loved me, and I remember sitting with those words for a moment, the warmth of them, and then, arriving just behind, the fear. I told her about my anger problem on our second date. I didn't know why I felt the need to disclose it so early, only that it seemed dishonest not to. Like dating someone without mentioning a chronic illness. Something they deserved to know. She'd taken it in stride, said everyone had things they worked on. But as the months went on, I watched myself from a slight distance, monitoring, always monitoring. Every time our voices rose in disagreement, I pulled back first, sometimes too far, sometimes in ways that frustrated her. Every time I felt something strong, I managed it carefully, turned it over before I expressed it, made sure the edges were smooth. "You don't have to do that," she told me once. We were arguing about something ordinary, and I'd gone quiet in the particular way I went quiet when I was containing. "Do what?" "Disappear," she said. "When you're upset, you just go somewhere." "I'm here," I said. "You're managing me," she said. "Like I'm something that could break." I didn't know how to explain that I was managing myself, not her, that the distance she felt wasn't absence but protection, that I had been told, in every language except plain speech, that when I felt things strongly, damage followed. We lasted another 3 months. After my father's funeral, I stayed to help my mother sort through the house. She was 71. The house was full of 35 years of accumulated life, my father's tools in the garage, my mother's recipe boxes in the kitchen, the accumulated weight of a long marriage in every drawer and closet. My mother moved through it with the careful efficiency of someone who needed to stay busy to stay upright, and I moved through it beside her, mostly in silence. On the third afternoon, she asked me to clear out the attic. The attic smelled of insulation and old cardboard. There were boxes of Christmas decorations, boxes of tax returns going back to 1987, a garment bag containing what I assumed was my mother's wedding dress. I worked methodically, labeling things to keep and things to donate, the way I did most things. The folder was in a box labeled household records, filed between a folder of appliance warranties and one containing the original deed to the house. It was a standard manila folder. On the tab, in handwriting I didn't recognize, was written, Carter, ETHAN, Psychological Evaluation, age 8. I sat down on the attic floor. The insulation hummed around me. Somewhere below, I could hear my mother moving through the kitchen. I held the folder for a long moment without opening it. Then I opened it. The first page was a cover letter on clinical letterhead. The date was from nearly 30 years ago. The name at the top was mine. The first sentence read, Ethan displays no signs of anger dysregulation or impulse control disorder. I read it 3 times. Then I turned the page. The second page was a clinical summary. I read it the way I read engineering specifications, linearly, carefully, without skipping ahead, because some part of me understood that this document required the same discipline I brought to everything else, that if I rushed it, I would miss something. That precision mattered here in a way I couldn't afford to compromise. Dr. Patricia Calloway had written 6 pages. I know the date she wrote them. I know the date of each of the 4 sessions I'd attended. I know the specific assessment tools she'd used, standardized instruments, behavioral observation, parent and teacher questionnaires, because she listed them on page 2 with the methodical transparency of someone who expected her work to be reviewed. What she found, across 4 sessions with an 11-year-old boy, was the following: no evidence of anger dysregulation, no impulse control disorder, no conduct disorder, no oppositional defiant disorder, emotional responses within normal developmental range for age, vocabulary and emotional literacy above average, conflict avoidance noted, identified not as a problem, but as a possible learned response to household environment. That last phrase, possible learned response to household environment, I read it 4 times. She had also written, on the 5th page, a section titled Recommendations. The language there was careful in the way clinical language is careful when it's trying to say something difficult without being inflammatory. She recommended family therapy. She recommended that the parents consider their own contributions to the household emotional climate. She noted that the referring concern, Ethan's anger problem, did not appear to be clinically supported by the assessment findings, and suggested that the family might benefit from exploring what other dynamics could be generating conflict in the home. The final line of the recommendations section read, without appropriate intervention at the family level, there is risk that the current dynamic will cause significant harm to the child's developing self-concept. I sat on the attic floor for a long time after I finished reading. The insulation hummed. Below me, my mother was moving through the kitchen. I could hear the particular sound of her filling the kettle, the soft percussion of a cabinet closing. I thought about a word, self-concept. My self-concept at 38 was this: I was a man with an inherited capacity for violence that I had spent my entire adult life suppressing through discipline and isolation. I was someone who could not be trusted with closeness, who kept people at a careful distance because the alternative, allowing them near enough to see what was inside me, what might surface under sufficient pressure, was too dangerous. I was my father's son in the way that mattered most, the way that couldn't be changed, only managed. That was the self-concept I'd been living inside for 30 years. Dr. Calloway, when I was 11 years old, had looked at me carefully for 4 sessions and concluded it was a fiction. There was a second folder behind the first. This one contained a single document, a follow-up letter dated 8 months after the initial evaluation, addressed to my parents. The tone was slightly different from the clinical report, slightly more direct. Dr. Calloway had written to follow up on the family therapy referral she'd made. She noted she had not heard from the family since the initial sessions and wanted to check in. She reiterated her concern about the household dynamic. She expressed, in language I read twice to make sure I was understanding correctly, that she believed the referring concern, Ethan's behavior, was being misattributed, and that without honest engagement with the actual sources of conflict in the home, Ethan was at risk of internalizing a self-image that could follow him into adulthood with lasting consequences. My parents had never responded to this letter. I know because the letter was still in their house, in a folder labeled Household Records, filed between appliance warranties and a property deed. They had kept it. I don't know why they kept it. Maybe they forgot it was there. Maybe they kept everything. Maybe, and this is the thought that arrived last and stayed longest, maybe some part of them couldn't throw it away. I drove back to Dayton the following morning. I told my mother I needed to get back to work, which was partly true. I told her I'd call later in the week, which I did. I did not tell her what I'd found in the attic, because I was not yet sure what to do with it, and I had spent 38 years being very careful about what I did with things I wasn't sure about. I put the folder on my kitchen table, and I looked at it for 3 days. I went to work. I ran my usual mornings. I cooked and ate and went to bed at 10:30. I did all the things that constituted my life, and underneath all of them, the folder sat on my kitchen table like something with mass, like something exerting a gravitational pull on everything in the room. On the 4th day, I searched for Dr. Patricia Calloway. She had retired 7 years earlier. There was an address listed for her in Cincinnati, about an hour from Dayton, through an alumni directory for a professional psychology association. I sat with that address for another day. Then I wrote her a letter. I explained who I was, that she had evaluated me when I was 11, that I had recently found her reports in my parents' home and had some questions, if she was willing to speak with me. I included my phone number and told her there was no obligation. She called me on a Tuesday, 11 days later. "Ethan Carter," she said when I answered. Her voice was older than I'd remembered, but the quality of it was the same, unhurried, the voice of someone who was comfortable with silence. "I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from you." She agreed to meet me. We sat in the living room of her house outside Cincinnati on a Saturday afternoon in April. She was 73 now, white-haired, with the same small plants I remembered from her office, or different plants, but the same impulse toward them. She'd made tea. I held the mug with both hands the way I'd held things since childhood, the grounding weight of it, and I waited while she looked at me with the careful attention I'd forgotten she had. "You look like him," she said. "Your father, around the jaw." "I know," I said. "Not in the way that matters," she said, directly, without preamble. I didn't speak for a moment. "I read your report," I said. "Both of them." She nodded. "I need you to tell me what you remember," I said. "About those sessions." "About me." She was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone organizing memories rather than deciding whether to share them. "You were one of the gentlest children I'd seen in years of practice," she said. "Thoughtful, very careful about how you expressed yourself, even at 11 more careful than most adults. You had a strong sense of fairness. You didn't like injustice. You could articulate your feelings with unusual precision." She paused. "You were also frightened, not of other people, of yourself." Another pause. "Which told me a great deal about what you'd been taught." I set my mug down on the table. "The referral," I said. "My parents brought me because of an incident at school." "They brought you because they had labeled you as the problem," she said. "Clinically, what they described, an 11-year-old defending himself verbally and physically against a bully, was unremarkable. Normal. The concern they expressed was disproportionate to what they described." She held my gaze. "In my professional assessment, they were not describing a troubled child. They were describing a child they had decided was troubled." The living room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed. A bird somewhere in the yard. "My father," I said. "Your father had significant anger dysregulation," she said simply. That was clear from the parent interviews. What was also clear was that he was entirely resistant to that framing. A pause. He was not willing to be the identified patient. He needed the problem to live somewhere else. I thought about my father standing in the kitchen doorway when I was 6. Can't control yourself. The particular satisfaction in his voice when he'd said I knew it after the school incident. 30 years of moments that I had understood as evidence of my own deficiency, now rearranging themselves into a different configuration. I want to ask you something, I said, and I need an honest answer. Of course. In your professional opinion, I stopped. Started again. Was there ever anything in how I presented in those 4 sessions that suggested I had my father's problem? She looked at me steadily. No, she said, nothing. The word landed simply, without drama, the way true things do when they've been waiting a long time to be said. I drove home in the late afternoon, and I sat in my apartment, and I let myself do something I hadn't done in longer than I could remember. I let myself think about my life, not analyze it, not strategize around it. Just look at it. The way you look at a room you've been living in for years and suddenly see the furniture differently, as if someone moved it while you weren't watching. I thought about Melissa. The way I'd disappeared into myself during arguments, the careful management she'd felt as distance. I thought about the promotion I'd turned down 3 years ago, senior project lead, a team of 12. Because leadership required a raised voice sometimes, required authority, and I didn't trust what might surface if I allowed myself to have authority over other people. I thought about James, my closest friend, who had told me once, laughing, that I was the most conflict-averse person he'd ever met, and I had taken it as a compliment. I thought about every relationship I'd held at a distance, every moment of anger I'd swallowed before it could become evidence, every time I'd chosen isolation over intimacy, because intimacy required letting someone close enough to see what I'd been told was in there. I thought about being 6 years old and crying about something small, and my father watching me from the doorway. Can't control yourself. I had spent 32 years since that moment doing nothing but controlling myself, and I had called that control. I had called it discipline and emotional intelligence and self-awareness. I had built an identity around it, a career, a life. It had been fear, just fear. The particular, precise fear of a child who was told he was dangerous before he had any way to evaluate whether the claim was true, and who had then spent every subsequent year accumulating evidence that confirmed it, because that is what human beings do with beliefs they absorb young and never examine. We find the evidence. We build the case. We convict ourselves on testimony that was never cross-examined. My father had an anger problem. He couldn't live with that, so he gave it to me. I called James that evening. I hadn't planned to. I was sitting at my kitchen table with the folder in front of me, and I picked up my phone and called him before I'd thought about why. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he said. How are you doing? How was the funeral? I need to tell you something, I said. He went quiet in the way of someone who understands that tone. I told him about the folder, the reports, Dr. Calloway, what she'd said about my father, about me, about the 4 sessions she'd had with an 11-year-old boy she described as one of the gentlest she'd ever met. James listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. He was, in most circumstances, not a patient listener, but he stayed quiet through all of it, and when I finished, there was a silence of several seconds. Ethan, he said. I know. He stopped. I don't know what to say. I don't either, I said. I'm still trying to. I don't know what to do with it. What did the doctor say when she found out you'd never known? I thought about Dr. Calloway's living room. The tea. The plants. Her voice delivering the clinical assessment of my 11-year-old self with the same unhurried directness she'd probably used in every session of her career. She said she warned them, I said. My parents, in the follow-up letter. I picked up the letter, looked at the last paragraph. She said she warned them exactly what would happen. What does that mean? James asked. I don't know yet, I said, but I was going to find out. I drove back to my mother's house on a Saturday morning without calling first. This was deliberate. I had thought about calling, had picked up my phone twice on Friday evening and put it down again, because calling would give her time to prepare, to arrange her expression and her answers and the particular version of events she'd been maintaining for 30 years. I didn't want the prepared version. I wanted the unguarded one. She was in the garden when I pulled into the driveway. She had her back to me, kneeling beside the raised bed along the fence where she grew tomatoes every summer, and she didn't hear me get out of the car. I stood for a moment watching her. a 71-year-old woman in gardening gloves, working carefully in the April morning. And I felt something complicated that I didn't try to sort out. She turned when she heard my footsteps on the gravel. Ethan, surprise, and then something behind the surprise that tightened almost imperceptibly. I didn't know you were coming. I know, I said. She pulled off one glove and then the other. She was reading my face, the way she had always read my face. The lifetime habit of a woman who had learned to monitor the emotional, whether in a house where weather mattered. Come inside, she said. I'll make coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. The same chairs, the same window above the sink, with the same view of the same backyard, where I had spent the better part of my childhood learning to be very careful. I put the folder on the table between us. She looked at it. Her hands were around her coffee mug, and she didn't move them. I found it in the attic, I said. In the household records box. Silence. Mom, I don't know what that is, she said. She said it carefully. Too carefully. The voice of someone stating a position rather than reporting a fact. Dr. Patricia Calloway, I said. She evaluated me when I was 11, after the incident at school with Tyler Marsh. You and Dad took me to see her 4 times. My mother looked at the folder. Her jaw had tightened in the almost invisible way that I recognized from childhood, the specific muscular adjustment she made when she was about to maintain something. That was a long time ago, she said. I spoke with her, I said. Last weekend. She's retired, but she remembered me. She remembered the sessions. Something shifted in my mother's face. She told me what her assessment found, I said. I also read her follow-up letter, the one she sent you and Dad 8 months after the sessions ended. My mother set down her mug. Ethan, I need you to not do the thing where you manage this, I said quietly. I need you to just talk to me, please. A long silence. Outside, a bird was making a sound in the yard. The refrigerator hummed. All the ordinary sounds of a house, where extraordinary things had happened, without anyone naming them. We thought it would help, my mother said finally. The words were so inadequate that for a moment I couldn't respond. Help, I said. You were having trouble. At school, with other children. I defended myself against a bully, I said. Once. And Dr. Calloway's report says that my response was developmentally normal and that there was no clinical evidence of any anger disorder. I kept my voice even. So I need you to tell me what you mean by help, because her report didn't find a problem. So what exactly were you trying to fix? My mother looked at her hands. Your father was, she stopped. I know what Dad was, I said. Another silence, longer this time. He couldn't, she started again, slowly, the way you move through a room in the dark. He couldn't hear it. When Dr. Calloway said the things she said in those sessions. About the family. She stopped again. About him, I said. She closed her eyes briefly. He couldn't accept it. He left the 3rd session before it ended. He said she didn't know what she was talking about, that she was creating problems where there weren't any. A pause. He said the problem was you, but she'd already told you it wasn't. She told us what she thought, my mother said, and I could hear the old defensiveness in it, the decades-practiced habit of finding language that neither confirmed nor denied. Doctors don't always know everything about a family. Mom, she went quiet. She wrote in her report that there was no anger disorder, I said. She wrote that my emotional responses were within normal range. She wrote that my conflict avoidance was a possible learned response to household environment. I watched my mother's face. She wasn't confused about which direction the problem was flowing. My mother stood up from the table. She walked to the kitchen window and stood there with her back to me, looking out at the garden she'd just come in from. Her shoulders were very still in the particular way of someone holding themselves together through posture alone. He needed it to be you, she said to the window. The words came out quietly, without drama, the way confessions sometimes do when they've been held a very long time. Not with relief, exactly, but with the exhaustion of something that has been kept compressed, finally being allowed to expand. He couldn't be the one with the problem, she said. In this family, in this neighborhood. At his job, he'd been at that plant for 20 years, everyone respected him, he coached Little League, he was on the church council. She paused. He couldn't be the man who couldn't control his temper. He needed somewhere for it to go. So he put it on me, I said. She didn't answer. He told me I had his problem, I said. He told me I'd inherited it. He looked at me when I was 6 years old crying about something small, and he told me I couldn't control myself. And you, I stopped, started again. You let that become the story. She turned from the window. Her face was not the face I'd expected. I had braced myself for defensiveness, for the managed version, for the decades of practiced non-acknowledgement. What I saw instead was something older than any of that. Something that had been living behind the management for a very long time. I told myself you were resilient, she said. Her voice had gone thin. I told myself children are resilient, that you were strong, that you'd, she pressed her lips together. I told myself you wouldn't remember, when you were older, that it would smooth over. I'm 38 years old, I said. I've never been in a relationship longer than 2 years, because I have spent my entire adult life terrified of hurting someone the way I was told I was capable of hurting people. I turned down a promotion because it required me to have authority over other people, and I didn't trust what I might do with authority. I looked at her steadily. I never let anyone close enough to find out whether the story was true, because I was too afraid of what they'd find. My mother sat back down at the table. She didn't say anything for a long moment. She looked at the folder, which was still sitting between us where I'd placed it. I know, she said finally, very quietly. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to actually answer it. She looked at me. Did you know, I said, not about the report specifically. Did you know at some point, at any point, that the story wasn't true, that it wasn't me? The silence that followed was the longest of the morning. My mother's hands were flat on the table now. She was looking at them. Yes, she said. One word. I sat with it. When, I said. Early, she said. Earlier than I should admit, she exhaled slowly. I saw how careful you were, how hard you tried, how much you monitored yourself even as a small boy. And I thought, a child who has his father's problem doesn't look like this. A child who can't control himself doesn't work this hard to control himself. She paused. I think I knew for a long time. But you didn't say anything. I didn't know how to, she said. To your father, to you. By the time I understood clearly what we'd done, it had been so many years. The story it was everywhere. Your teachers had been told. Your aunts and uncles. I didn't know how to take it back without, she stopped. Without admitting what you'd both done, I said. She didn't deny it. So every birthday, I said, every Christmas, every time I called and told you I was fine, that I was managing, that I didn't need anything, you knew that the reason I was managing and not needing anything was because we'd taught me my needs were dangerous. She pressed her hand over her mouth. I wasn't shouting. I want to be clear about that. My voice had stayed even through all of it, the way it always stayed even, the way I had trained it to stay even for 3 decades. But something in the evenness of it seemed to land harder than shouting would have. My mother was crying now, quietly, without making much sound, the way she'd cried at my father's funeral. I'm sorry, she said. Ethan, I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. I know, I said, and I meant it. Not as absolution, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but as a statement of fact. I believed her. The apology was real. And it was also 30 years too late, and both of those things were true simultaneously, and I didn't know yet how to hold them together, only that I had to. I reached into the folder and removed the 2 reports and the follow-up letter, and set them on the table in front of her. I'm going to need some time, I said, to figure out what this means and what comes next. I'm not walking away, but I need time. She nodded. She was still looking at the documents. I stood up from the table. There's one more thing, my mother said. I stopped. She got up from the table, slowly, with the careful movement of someone whose knees weren't reliable anymore, and went to the drawer beside the refrigerator, the junk drawer, the one that had always held batteries and rubber bands and birthday candles, and the accumulated small detritus of family life. She reached to the back of it and removed an envelope. She held it for a moment without looking at me. Then she set it on the table. It was letter-sized, sealed. My name on the front, ETHAN, in my father's handwriting. The particular blocky print he'd always used. The capital letters slightly larger than necessary. The way men of his generation sometimes wrote when they were being deliberate about something. He wrote it 6 weeks before he died, my mother said. He told me to give it to you after. She paused. He said you'd understand why he couldn't give it to you himself. I looked at the envelope. Did you read it? I asked. No, she said. He asked me not to. I picked it up. The paper was slightly heavier than I expected, cardstock, not copy paper. He had chosen it deliberately. My father, who had built his life around never being the one who was wrong, who had needed the problem to live somewhere other than himself, had 6 weeks before his death written something he couldn't say out loud, and asked his wife to pass it on after he was gone. I held it without opening it. I was not ready to open it. Not here, not in this kitchen, not with my mother watching my face. "I'll call you," I said. I picked up my keys and the folder, and I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway and out the front door into the April morning. And I sat in my car with my father's letter on the passenger seat and the spring light coming through the windshield, and I breathed. Just breathed. For a long time. I read my father's letter that night. I waited until I was home. Until I had eaten something. I couldn't tell you what. Something from the refrigerator assembled without thought. And until the apartment had gone fully dark outside the windows, and the only light was the lamp on the table beside the couch. I sat down. I held the envelope for a moment. Then I opened it. My father had not been a writer. This was apparent from the first line. The letter was handwritten on 2 sheets of the heavy cardstock, and the handwriting was careful in the way of someone unaccustomed to being careful with words. The letters formed with more deliberateness than his usual blocky print, as if he'd been aware that this mattered and had tried to rise to it. It was not a clean letter. It was not the letter of a man who had spent 6 weeks composing something eloquent and resolved. It was the letter of a man who had something he needed to say, and had found, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he couldn't find a way to avoid saying it. He started with my name. Then he wrote, "I know I wasn't easy." 4 words. The understatement of such magnitude that I sat with them for a full minute before reading on. He wrote that he had known, for a long time, that what he'd told me about myself wasn't true. He didn't use the word lie. He never used that word. He wrote instead that he had said things that weren't fair, and that he had said them because it was easier than being the one who had the problem. He wrote this without apparent awareness of how insufficient it sounded, which I believed meant he was being as honest as he knew how to be. He wrote, "I know you made yourself small because of me. I know you stayed away from things because of what I told you. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know what I was doing to you." I stopped reading. I set the letter down on my knee and looked at the ceiling for a while. My father, the man who had spent 68 years being unable to accept responsibility for anything, who had redirected and deflected and projected with such consistency that it had become structural, load-bearing, the thing the whole family was built around, had in the last 6 weeks of his life sat down with 2 pieces of cardstock and written, "I'm not going to pretend I didn't know. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't entirely." I picked up the letter and kept reading. The last paragraph was the shortest. The handwriting there was slightly less controlled, as if he'd been tired by the time he reached it, or as if the control had simply given out. He wrote, "You were never like me. The thing I told you was in you, it was in me. I couldn't face that. I put it on you because you were there and you were young enough that you'd believe it. That wasn't right. I know that. I'm sorry." 2 words at the end, at the very bottom of the second page. "I'm sorry." I sat on my couch for a long time after I finished reading. The lamp made its small circle of light. Outside, the street was quiet. Somewhere in the building above me, someone was walking back and forth, the particular rhythm of someone pacing, and then it stopped. My father had known. That was the part I kept returning to. He had known the story wasn't true, and he had told it anyway, for decades, because the alternative was a self-image he couldn't sustain. He had looked at his small son and seen a place to put his shame, and he had put it there. And then he had watched that son build an entire life around the thing he'd planted. And he had died knowing this. I thought about whether I was angry. I searched myself for it carefully, the way I searched for everything, methodically, without rushing. What I found was something more like sorrow. For him, for the man he might have been if he'd been capable of sitting with his own failing rather than distributing it. For the wasted years, all those years of muted life. For the children I hadn't had, and the woman I hadn't let myself love properly, and the career I'd kept deliberately smaller than it needed to be, all of it arranged around a belief that was never mine to carry. Sorrow, and underneath it, very quiet, something that I was cautious about naming yet because it felt too new and fragile. Relief. I called Melissa 3 weeks later. I want to be clear that I wasn't calling to resurrect something. We had been over for 9 years. She'd been married for 6 of them, had a daughter, had a life that had organized itself entirely without me, as it should have. I wasn't calling to change any of that. I called because she deserved the truth. She answered on the 4th ring, slightly breathless, the sound of someone picking up in the middle of something. Ethan, surprise, and then something warmer. Hi, is everything okay? Yes, I said. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. Do you have a few minutes? She did. I heard her move to somewhere quieter. I told her what I'd found. The folder, the reports, Dr. Calloway, my mother's confession, my father's letter. I told her what I'd understood about the 9 months we'd been together. The disappearing, the managing, the careful distance I'd maintained, because I'd believed that closeness was a risk I couldn't take. She was quiet for most of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment longer. The way you used to go somewhere, she said. When we argued, that wasn't you weren't leaving, you were containing. Yes, I said. I thought it was me, she said. I thought you just didn't trust me enough to stay. I didn't trust myself, I said. I thought if I stayed present in it, something would surface. A silence. God, Ethan, she said quietly. I know. I'm glad you called, she said. I'm glad you know now. We talked for another 20 minutes. Easily, without the careful calibration I used to bring to every conversation with her. When we said goodbye, it was warm and final and exactly right. I put down the phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment and noticed that I felt lighter. Not healed. I understood that healing was going to take longer than a phone call. But lighter. The weight of an apology I'd owed her for 9 years, now delivered. One less thing to carry. I started therapy in May. Dr. Akaffer worked out of an office near the university. I found her through a referral from my physician, who had noticed in a routine visit that I seemed more interested in discussing my stress levels than usual, and had asked a few careful questions. Her office had a plant in the corner that looked like it had survived considerable neglect, which I took as a good sign. I want to be specific about why I went. Not because I was broken. Not because I had an anger problem I needed to manage, or an inherited condition I needed to contain, or a fundamental instability that required professional supervision. I went because Dr. Calloway had written, 30 years ago, that I was at risk of significant harm to my developing self-concept. She had been right, and I had spent 30 years developing in that direction, building myself around a belief that was planted before I had any way to evaluate it, learning, with extraordinary thoroughness, to treat my own needs as secondary, my own feelings as suspect, my own presence in the world as something that required constant management. I went to therapy because I deserved to unlearn that. It was the most practical decision I'd made in a long time. In September, I started volunteering with a mentorship program for adolescent boys. A teacher at a middle school in my district ran it. She'd found me through the engineering company's community partnership program, and it met on Tuesday afternoons in a classroom that smelled of whiteboard markers and cafeteria food, which is to say it smelled exactly like every middle school classroom I'd ever been in. The boys were 12, 13, 14. They came from various circumstances. Some were there because teachers had noticed them struggling, some because their parents had enrolled them, a few because they'd been referred by school counselors for behavioral concerns, the kind of boys who'd been told, in various ways and by various authorities, that their feelings were a problem. I recognized them immediately. I want to be careful about projecting my story onto theirs. Dr. Akaffer had been clear about this, and she was right. Each of them had their own history, their own specific circumstances, their own path through whatever they were navigating. I wasn't there to recast them in my image, but there was a particular boy, Marcus, 13, quiet, with the watchful stillness of someone who had learned to read rooms, who reminded me of something I tried not to look at too directly. One Tuesday, after the others had left, Marcus stayed behind. He was reorganizing his backpack with unnecessary care, the way you do when you're not quite ready to leave. I waited. Can I ask you something? He said without looking up. Sure, I said. When you get mad, he said, what do you do with it? I thought about how to answer this. I thought about 38 years of careful management, of suppression dressed as discipline, of all the things I'd done with anger that had not, in retrospect, served me well. I used to pretend I didn't feel it, I said. I thought feeling it meant something was wrong with me. He looked up. Did it, he said. No, I said. Feeling angry is just information. It's your mind telling you something isn't right. The feeling isn't the problem. I paused. What you do with it matters, but the feeling itself is just human. He considered this with the serious deliberateness of a 13-year-old evaluating something important. My dad says I can't control my temper, he said. I held that for a moment. Do you think that's true? I said. He shrugged. The elaborate, defensive shrug of a boy who has been told something about himself often enough that he's started to believe it and isn't sure he wants to. I don't know, he said. Everyone says it. I looked at him for a moment. This boy with his careful stillness and his watchful eyes and the particular exhaustion of someone who has been doing the work of managing other people's perceptions of him for longer than he should have had to. Everyone being wrong isn't impossible, I said. It happens. He looked at me. Something shifted in his expression, very small, the way small things shift in people who have learned not to let much show. Yeah, he said. Okay. He zipped up his backpack and went to the door. See you Tuesday, he said. See you Tuesday, I said. I spent 30 years trying not to become my father. I avoided relationships that might reveal what was inside me. I kept my career deliberately smaller than it needed to be. I monitored myself with such vigilance that the monitoring became invisible, became identity, became the thing I called my personality. I was careful. I was controlled. I was, by every observable measure, fine. And none of it was strength. It was just fear wearing strength's clothes. My father died knowing what he'd done. He wrote it on 2 pieces of cardstock with the careful handwriting of a man trying, too late, to do one thing right. I don't know whether to call that courage or cowardice, whether it counts more that he said it at all, or less that he waited until he could say it from a safe distance. Some days I think one thing, some days the other. What I know is this: I am not him. I was never him. It took one afternoon in an attic, 30 years of living a smaller life than I deserved, a retired psychologist's still precise memory, and 2 pieces of card, stock in my father's handwriting to understand that. But I understand it now. And the rest of my life, whatever I choose to build with it, whoever I choose to let close enough to see it, belongs entirely to me. That's not